discussing a new essay we just published, Fed, Woke, Fear. The essay talks about how the frivolous spending of the Fed, or the enabling of frivolous government spending by the Fed, is fostering a sense of entitlement, which is the nemesis to capitalism. So we're sort of destroying the system from within, assuming that the central bank, the Federal Reserve, is, like some pundits claim, the fundamental pillar of our economic system. Well, this is actually the pillar that is spreading entitlement, which is leading towards this, really absurd situation that a lot of people, particularly in the elites, so particularly educated people on the coasts, they tend to, lean towards, wokeism, socialism. They most likely will vote for Kamala Harris, which is really a vote for the apparatus of the Democratic Party, which is the party of elitism, and also the party of cronism. So really things have been flipped on top. But the purpose of this particular essay is not to talk about the political landscape of the US. It's just simply to say that with the Fed, we have a metastasizing cancer that is actually destroying capitalism. And what we mean under capitalism is really a system where the fine balance between what we say stick and carrot is being threaded every day. And because this is a very complex system, you cannot have, let's say, a top-down organization. And that's why you need voluntary exchange and bottom-up decision-making by humans that lead towards a more stable economic system that we call capitalism. Fundamentally, what this does is it spreads these isms, socialism, wokeism, and eventually leads to fear. And this is really the bad thing, the sad part of the whole story. Now, this essay is actually an excerpt from an upcoming short story that I'm hopefully going to publish, sometime this year. The short story is actually much more, it's a real story. It's a fiction. The story is about really how we're undermining our future generations with our acting today. So this goes a little further. It's not just saying that we are undermining ourselves today, but also future generations. And there's a story about a person that is actually sent back from the future to stop quantitative easing, because that is the beginning of the end of capitalism. So there's, leading a little bit towards the Terminator narrative, where somebody comes from the future to prevent an act that will eventually be very, very bad in the future. But let's get back to the essay. So Fed, Woke, Fear is about how the Fed is spreading a sense of entitlement through its enabling of reckless monetary policy and government spending. It's driving, of course, inflation, but more importantly, also it has this effect of entitlement, which is nemesis to capitalism, that spreads fear, and that needs to be stopped. This is not in our podcast. It's August 30th, 2024. This is Krim Delco. For the day, the fund is up 2.5%. The market's up 60 basis points. For the year, we're up 5.4%. The market is up 18%. We're underperforming by 12.5%. So the essay Fed, Woke, Fear starts with a description of what we mean with capitalism. There's a lot of different types of descriptions. I just attended a seminar at Duke University about profits and how to understand the concept of capitalism. So they talk about this. And in my opinion, capitalism is really the system which threads this fine balance between the stick and the carrot, the stick being work and the carrot being consumption. So you have this fine balance where you have to do something in order to be able to consume. And consumption is an instinct. We assume it is a human instinct, so everybody wants to consume. There's nothing wrong with that. We shouldn't be chastising consumption. It's a little bit like having sex. It's just part of being human. Some cultures chastise it. Some cultures find it's a bad thing. And certainly, ostentatious consumption has a negative connotation because it's driven by vanity, very similar maybe to porn, right? Porn is not really the kind of sex that we talk about when Christians talk about sex, or Muslims, or any other faithful person. But we do it because we love our spouse, and we also want to procreate. So there's a difference between that and let's say porn. And the same way, there's a difference between ostentatious consumption and consumption, which is really the driver of human activity, right? It's the stick and the carrot. Like, on the one hand, you have to, why am I going to work? What's the purpose of work? Well, I need to consume. Now, consumption could be also expanded into a broader sense. Maybe you could throw in there investment. So if I consume, for example, education, I consume, I buy a piece of land, and I make it look nice for my kids so they can play and be healthy. So it's not just, again, it's not just buying Nike shoes or Gucci handbags, right? But that's part of it too, and there's nothing wrong with that. We're saying in the essay, there is nothing wrong with consumption, but what we need is this counterbalancing act, right? When I run out of money, I need to go to work. And this is how this fine thread, this fine balance between stick and carrot is being pursued by the system of capitalism. And it doesn't work in any other system. The other systems, whether it's feudalism or socialism or wokeism, if you will, this new system that hopefully we're not going to vote for, but we're definitely voting for or against in this election. Nobody's voting for Kamala Harris. We're voting for a system, an apparatus that is actually, let's call it wokeism, right? It's this mix of socialism with identity politics. So it's socialism for certain people, but not for everybody else. It's undermining also the old guard, so it's kind of a creeping revolution. So it has a lot of facets of Bolshevism and socialism and Marxism, but then it also has facets, of course, of fascism, because it's based on identity, based on race. It's flipped on its head. So it's like the people that used to be the fascists are now the fascistes, and the fascistes are the fascists, and whatever. It doesn't matter. Again, this is not about the actual politics. I want to talk about how the Fed is actually nurturing all of this. And the Fed is nurturing all this as a passage that I'm leaning very strongly towards Philip Roth in I Married a Communist. So I want to make sure there's no accusation of plagiarism here. Definitely leaning on his sort of passage where he says, we're all greedily staring into the capitalist shop window, and with more and more consumption, we run out of consumption, and that's when fear creeps in, right? And I think that happens when consumption is unchecked. When consumption is unchecked, at some point you will consume yourself into quicksand. What you need is this constant check and balance, right? You can't, if the illusion of free money, which is what the Fed has given us, is turning us into these sort of consuming hamsters, and with that kind of consumption, with unchecked consumption, you are actually running into quicksand, and that leads to fear, and you turn into a rabbit of no consequence. This is a quote from Philip Roth. Of course, he puts it in a different context, but I think it's very nicely fitting into today's context. If we take the Fed printing to its consequential end game, where we have a society, let's say, of cabals and fiat economists and Wall Street people who make 10 times more money than normal people who actually make things. They live in Manhattan and they pay 20 times more for rent, and then it's totally ridiculous, absurd. They pay money so their kids can spend a vacation. They pay more money for their kids' vacation than not other people spend for their house. So totally absurd types of spendings that end up in this I guess you could say, I call it the Marie Antoinette moment, which is what happened in France before the French Revolution. So you have this absurdity of spending, absurdity of vanity, and on the other hand, you have a whole slew of people who are not participating in this Federal Reserve helicopter money scheme, and that will, of course, destroy our society. But most importantly, I think we have a chance. This is not just about, oh well, socialism is bad or wokeism is bad. This is not just that. Or It leads to fear. It leads to, fear is always bad. Fear amongst people leads to fascism and incarceration and bad outcomes. What we need is optimism. We need optimism. We want to have this can-do attitude, and we can only have this can-do attitude in a system where there is stick and carrot, right? We have to be able to work hard for our money and then spend it. If we get taxed, whether if you follow, let's say, the Biden politics, and hopefully not, but assuming this continues after November, we will have even more industrial policy, and we will have higher taxation. So you will have confiscatory taxes and confiscatory economic policies, which really will sort of kill all the initiatives out of the economy, right? People will move to other places, and the US economy will turn into a distributive economy very similar to lots of European states or even Latin American states, like let's say, for example, Argentina. And obviously, we all know what happened there. So we need to prevent this, and that's why Fat Woke Fear is really, it's a manifesto for people to stand up against this undermining of a system that has been working really well, that has brought millions of people out of poverty, and we don't want to give it up. We don't want to give it up, and I think we all need to stand up and fight for it, because it's been good to us. And I think it's a testimony for how much you want a better life for your kids if you fight for this, if you fight for to keep the system. Of course, the system has flaws. Voluntary exchange, market prices, free markets, they have their flaws. For example, pricing is not perfectly done, but just because the pricing is not perfectly done doesn't mean we should throw market prices overboard. Distribution is sometimes very extremely unequal, but if it's unequal because of people's merit, that's different than unequal like in wokeism, where it's just a certain cabal of people who gets to share the fruits of all the economy, and everybody else is sort of in a socialist hamster type situation. That doesn't work. That's much worse, because that's perceived unfair. So to summarize again, Fat Woke Fear, it's really an appel to everybody to fight for the system that we call capitalism, and avoid the entitlement spending that is driven by government, reckless government spending, and the Fed. The best way to do this is to rein in the Fed. We need to rein in the Fed, whether it's through audits or whether it's through changing the mandates of the Fed. First and foremost, we have to save the economic science from the fiat economists that are financed by the Fed. That's another big problem. Economics is not free. I mean, there is certainly free sort of islands of economics around the US, and Duke has one, Chicago still has some, but it's much more difficult for people to openly oppose the fiat economists of the Fed and the cabal of Wall Street, to oppose this nonsense that government spending and debt spending is somehow good for the economy. So we can also, we need to develop new knowledge, better knowledge in how systems work. I think Bitcoin and the Bitcoin Standard, the book by Safedin Ammous, is certainly one way to do this. Austrian economics, so Renaissance of Austrian economics, and a fine-tuning of Austrian economics. This has been written 100 years ago, so we can certainly add new knowledge to the writings, but we need to go back to the roots, to the first principles of economics, and save the science, and use that new knowledge that we can gain by also managing our economy in a much better way, so we have better opportunities for everybody. Thank you.